Hello, everyone. Welcome to my art room. I'm Danae. I'm glad you're here today. I'm going to do some abstract paintings with two colors, just blue and yellow. And I'm starting here with some NeoColor crayons. This one is black, and you can see off to the side I have a blue and a yellow. So my limited palette includes ultramarine blue and Hansa yellow, as well as white and black. I'm using the water in my cup to activate my crayon here so that it'll kind of smudge and it looks a little bit more watercolor painterly. And these NeoColor II crayons are water soluble, so they're going to reactivate as they have paint layered on top of them or other mediums or other water, anything wet and liquidy. But they're a fun way to get started to lay down some color and to create some patterns. I use this as sort of a warm up to get my hands moving, to get my eyes looking at the page, to create some interesting shapes to react to when I start with my acrylic paint. And some of these marks will definitely show up at the end. Here I'm using my titanium white. This is acrylic paint, just to push those colors back a little bit into the background, but also the acrylic paint is going to help seal those water soluble crayons so that they don't continue to move too much. Because the acrylic paint is a plastic, so as it dries, it will seal those water soluble elements into place. So here I want to start with a dark color. So I'm adding my blue and my yellow, which I know is going to make green. And I'm also adding black, and I'm adding white here just to kind of get the contrast between the really dark color and the really light color. So I can kind of see where I'm at in terms of, did I mix a really green paint? Is it a really blue paint? And this is showing up on camera as quite gray, but it has some green, like a deep, dark, like a dark teal to it. Here I added some black and I just wasn't quite happy with it, so I kind of scratched into the paint and smudged it out a bit. And I'm going to paint over that as well. So here I've mixed some more and now I've definitely got a green, kind of an olivey green. And depending with blue and yellow, how much blue you add versus how much yellow you add, you're going to create a wide variety of colors, which is why I chose the blue and the yellow, because I wanted to experiment and I wanted to play with some color making and just see where it could take me. And I have no clear idea of some design. I'm not even starting with like an inspiration image. I just wanted to play with the blue and the yellow and see what I could create, what colors might come out that would be interesting to use perhaps later in other pieces of art. So I'm just letting my imagination go. I don't have an end destination in mind. And so with abstract art, the process of painting is really actually quite emotional. So it's what I feel is looking right or going right. It's what I think is interesting to look at. And then as I add the layers, I know that images are going to um, come forward and they're going to be abstract. They may not be literal. They're definitely not going to be literal. But as I create the layers and add the paint and work uh, to make things interesting, then images do appear and, lines that I like and shapes that I like and colors that I like. And then as those layers build up, it just becomes more obvious as I'm getting to the end, because now I get to a point at the end where I don't really want to cover anything up. So I know that's when I'm nearing the end of my journey. So I have a little way to go here yet. I'm using this shaper tool to just add a straight line to see if that was interesting. And then I'm pressing the paint off to create some straight lines in the other little quadrants. And I'm scratching in, which is funny because I feel like it ends up looking a little bit like stitches. So here I'm just adding the colors that I'm using for this color palette so that if I do create something I really like, I can always go back and look at what I used to create. So I'm just going to let those dry. And I taped a little grid pattern onto my paper at the beginning, well, before I started filming. So I have 4 little rectangles that I'm working in, but I've painted over some of the tape, so it's hard to tell that there are 4 little rectangles. But I am going to eventually remove that tape and I'll have 4 paintings. So I was adding some more little marks with my NeoColor II crayon, and now I want to add some more permanent marks. So I'm using these China markers. The white is going to obviously show up better on the dark colors, but I'm even placing it on top of the white. And as I scratch into this yellow, the paint moves and scratches away, which I didn't expect and thought that was really interesting. So I've left that. Here I'm just adding some scribbles. These are going to still be in the background. I know that I'm not near the end yet, so I'm not overly concerned about the shapes I'm creating because I still have layers to add on top. And here I'm making some repeating arches, which is fun. I like that. And just some scratchy shapes. I had already done some of these ladder shapes. I scratched into the paint earlier, so I've added it now with this China marker. And I'm coming back in with some white just to add some brightness. I'm using my color shaper, which is a silicone brush, and I'm just lightly scraping the paint over the top so that it'll skip and it's not a solid color. I really like this technique because it allows you to add the color on top without obscuring the colors below. They kind of look like clouds or pillows. They're just very soft shapes. And I put quite a lot of paint on the end of the color shaper so that it will pull off really nicely. And here I'm just going to finish working on this side so that my paint has a chance to dry. And this is just how I like to sort of accentuate or showcase the colors that I use. And I'm going to write the brand as well as the colors so that if I ever go back to previous paintings, then I'll know exactly what I used to create those paintings. And then I decide to use that Posca marker to add some really fine little dots to the painting. It's a very fine tip. So the marks it leaves are very very small. I like it. And up here, I know that this one up here is pretty far from being done, but I'm adding the marks anyway because even if I paint on top, there's a chance that something will show through and that will be interesting. The bottom 2 paintings I'm feeling more happy with. I'm feeling like they're more complete. So I'm pretty sure those marks on that I put in with the Posca are going to show at the end. So I decided I wanted to darken up this one at the top, but my paint was not spreading well. So I'm just adding some clear gesso to the acrylic paint, and it's going to help my silicone brush apply that paint really smoothly over the layers that already exist. So if you find you're having trouble with layers and your paint sticking or not moving really easily, try adding some gesso. And of course, if you add white gesso, you're going to change the color of your paint, which is why I like to use clear gesso. And here I am just adding more layers, trying to figure out this one at the top gave me the most trouble. Um, just because I didn't really ever see a clear picture emerging. And not that the others have anything very realistic and clear, but I just feel like their shapes are more close to being complete. Here's a fun technique. If you have a gel plate, it's the same idea of using a stamp. I'm just going to add the paint to the gel plate and then stamp it onto the painting. So I've left the gel plate there just to give the paint a good chance to sink in and adhere to the paper. And here when I pull it off, that white paint was quite thick and it left kind of a smudgy, ugly, blobby sort of texture behind. So I thought I would try and stamp it again and see if I could fill in that messy place at the bottom. And I'm just going to try to line up my stamp and press it in again. And I decided to try and see if I could get the rest of the paint off. I actually didn't think it would stamp multiple times, but it did. That was kind of fun, and most of that paint is now off the plate. And I'm going to let that start to dry. I decide I don't like this mark, this black mark on this side, so I'm just taking a baby wipe and scrubbing it out, which you can do really easily with acrylic paint. So I'm still not happy with this bottom part. So I pull out one of my favorite stencils. This is still relatively new. It's called Bumps. I've got it from joggles.com. It's a Dana Wakely stencil. And I'm going to fuss with this for quite a while, actually. I add many, many layers because I'm trying to decide, do I want these shapes to be dark? Do I want them to be light? So I edit this um, down because it did take quite a long time, and I ended up deciding I wanted them to be dark and mostly blue. So this is a really dark navy I've mixed, but there's quite a few layers on them. And then as I was letting it dry, I decided I wanted to accentuate those little bumps. So I'm now taking some white and I've got a little bit of that Hansa yellow mixed in to warm it up just a touch. And I'm going to paint around all of these bumps. And it's kind of fun to watch them sort of emerge from the background and become their own little shapes. And this is a perfect example of, one layer informing the next layer. And this is leading me towards sort of the resolution of this upper rectangle. I sped this up quite a bit because it was a little bit slow and fiddly. painting out all these shapes. And as I painted them, the idea of a building emerged, that maybe this was a building with doors or windows or shapes. And so I kind of accentuate that by adding some blue around the edges just to highlight that shape I've painted in. And I'm really happy with it. And I decide that this is where I would like to finish for the day. I like to keep the tape I've used because there are also really interesting marks and, paint left over on those pieces of tape. So I always like to keep them. You can also use tape like this as washi tape. You can paint your own washi tape and have something really personal. And then as I'm removing the tape, I'm also getting to see now what each of those individual paintings really look like, which is exciting. I didn't seal the edges sometimes before I paint, and I've taped a border. I'll seal the edges so that the paint won't leak. I didn't do that, and it's actually not too bad. The paint stayed pretty much in the right place and didn't do any moving underneath the tape. So I was really happy with that. And here's the close up. This is where I decide to end the process. I'm happy with them. The yellow is not my favorite, but I was happy to experiment. I think I caught some interesting colors, some interesting textures, some interesting marks. So it was fun to do. And for me, painting is always fun. And here's just some of that tape to, which is also fun. So thank you so much for joining me today. I had fun painting and I had fun spending time with you. Please feel free to join me for some more art inspiration. Consider liking and subscribing, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.